Jennifer had been living in her lakefront home for 15 years. It wasn't just any house. It was her grandfather's old place, the one he bought back in 1967 when land was still affordable and developers hadn't touched every piece of countryside. The property was special. 12 acres of pure peace with a beautiful 3-acre lake sitting right behind the house. Her grandfather used to take her fishing there when she was little. After he passed away, Jennifer inherited everything. She moved in, fixed up the old house, and made it her own. Every morning, she'd have coffee on the back porch, watching the sunrise paint the water gold. On weekends, she'd take her kayak out or spend hours fishing from the dock her grandfather had built with his own hands. It was her sanctuary. For years, life was perfect. The property sat on a quiet country road with farmland stretching out in every direction. Jennifer had maybe 3 neighbors within a mile. Everyone knew everyone. People waved when they drove by. It was the kind of place where you could leave your doors unlocked and not worry about a thing. Then the developers came. Jennifer first heard about it at the local diner. Old Mr. Patterson, who owned the farm on the west side, had sold his land. 200 acres went to some development company from the city. Within months, construction crews were everywhere. Trees came down, bulldozers moved earth, and the peaceful country road turned into a busy construction zone with trucks rumbling past her house from dawn until dark. The development was called Pinewood Estates. Fancy name for what used to be a cornfield. They were building big houses, the kind with 3-car garages and fancy stone facades. Jennifer watched it all happen from her porch. The development wrapped around her property on 3 sides. Her lake became the scenic backdrop for dozens of new homes. She didn't think much of it at first. New neighbors meant the area was growing. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Maybe she'd meet some nice people. The houses sold fast. Young families moved in. Professionals from the city looking for space and quiet. Within a year, 47 homes were occupied and Pinewood Estates was fully established. That's when things started getting weird. Jennifer began noticing people walking around her lake. At first, it was just 1 or 2 folks with dogs, strolling along the shoreline like they were taking an evening walk through a park. She figured they were confused, maybe didn't realize it was private property. She'd wave and politely let them know this was her land, and most people apologized and left. But it kept happening. More and more people. Families would come down to the water's edge with picnic blankets. Teenagers would show up with fishing poles. One Saturday morning, Jennifer woke up to find someone launching a kayak from her dock. Her dock, the one her grandfather built. She went outside in her bathrobe and slippers. "Excuse me," she called out to the man, pushing his kayak into the water. "This is private property." The man looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "This is the community lake." "No," Jennifer explained, trying to stay patient. "This is my lake. It's on my property. You can't just use it." The man laughed like she'd told a joke. "Lady, I bought my house specifically because of lake access. The developer showed us the lake in the brochures. It's part of the neighborhood." "I don't know what the developer told you," Jennifer said, "but this lake is on my land. I own it. My grandfather bought it in 1967, long before any of these houses existed." The man's friendly expression turned cold. "That doesn't sound right. I'm going to check with the HOA about this." He pulled his kayak back onto the shore, gave her an annoyed look, and walked back toward the development. Jennifer stood there feeling frustrated. This was getting out of hand. She went inside and dug out her property paperwork. The deed was crystal clear. The lake sat entirely within her property boundaries. Every inch of it belonged to her. She thought showing people the paperwork would solve the problem, but when she tried, most folks didn't want to look at it. They'd brush her off, insisting they knew what they'd been told when they bought their homes. Some were polite but dismissive. Others were downright rude. "You're just being difficult," one woman told her when Jennifer asked her to stop letting her kids swim in the lake. "It's a lake. Lakes are for everyone." "Not private lakes on private property," Jennifer replied. The woman rolled her eyes and walked away, her children still splashing in Jennifer's water. The situation got worse when the HOA officially formed. Jennifer started receiving mail addressed to Pinewood Estates resident. The letters talked about upcoming meetings, community rules, and monthly dues. She ignored them at first. She wasn't part of their neighborhood. Her house and land existed long before Pinewood Estates was even a thought in some developer's mind. Then she got a more official-looking letter. This one came from the HOA Board of Directors, signed by someone named Robert Chen, the HOA president. The letter had a stern tone, like a principal scolding a student. It reminded her about community rules regarding the lake. According to the letter, she was violating policy by putting up private property signs around the shoreline. The signs were unwelcoming and not in keeping with community aesthetics. Jennifer read the letter 3 times, each time getting more annoyed. The letter went on to mention that her dock needed repainting. Apparently, the natural weathered wood didn't meet HOA standards. They wanted it painted in one of their approved colors, beige, tan, or light gray. This was insane. They were telling her what to do with her own property she owned before they even existed. She called the HOA office number listed on the letter. A cheerful woman answered, "Pinewood Estates HOA, how can I help you?" "Hi, I received a letter about lake rules in my dock," Jennifer explained. "But I'm not part of your HOA. My property isn't in Pinewood Estates." There was a pause. "What's your address?" Jennifer gave it. "Oh yes, I see your file here. You're on Oak Ridge Road, the lakefront property." "Right, and I'm not part of the HOA." "Well," the woman said slowly, "the lake is considered a community amenity, so all lake-related properties fall under HOA jurisdiction." "That's not how property rights work," Jennifer said, trying to keep her voice calm. "I own the lake. It's on my deed. I have survey maps. The lake is entirely on my land. I'll have to escalate this to the board," the woman replied. "Someone will be in touch." Jennifer hung up, feeling like she'd just had a conversation in another language. How could they possibly think they had any say over her property? A few days later, she got her answer. An email arrived from Robert Chen himself, asking to meet to discuss the lake situation. Jennifer agreed, figuring a face-to-face conversation might clear things up. She printed out her deed, her survey maps, and her property tax records that clearly showed the lake's acreage as part of her taxed land. Robert showed up with 2 other board members. All 3 wore serious expressions like they were conducting important business. Jennifer invited them in and spread her documents on the dining room table. "As you can see," she explained, pointing to the survey map, "the lake is entirely within my property boundaries. Right here, these lines show." Robert held up his hand, cutting her off. "We've reviewed the developer's plans for Pinewood Estates. The lake was marketed as a community feature. Many residents purchased their homes based on lake access. That's between them and the developer," Jennifer said. "The developer didn't own my lake. They couldn't promise access to property they didn't own." "Nevertheless," Robert continued, his tone getting sharper, "the residents have expectations. We're asking you to be reasonable and neighborly. Consider signing an easement that would grant shared access." Jennifer stared at him. "You want me to give away rights to my private lake? The lake my grandfather owned? That I've owned for 15 years? We'd be willing to offer modest compensation," one of the other board members added. "It's not for sale," Jennifer said firmly, "and neither is access to it. This is my property. I'm not signing anything." The 3 of them exchanged glances. Robert stood up, gathering his papers. "I hope you'll reconsider. It would be unfortunate if this became contentious." After they left, Jennifer sat at her table staring at her property documents. That last comment felt like a threat. What did he mean by contentious? She was about to find out. Jennifer didn't have to wait long to understand what Robert meant by contentious. 3 days after their meeting, another letter arrived. This one was even more formal, with legal-sounding language that made her head hurt just reading it. The letter listed 5 violations. Her grass was allegedly too long in the front yard, exceeding the HOA's maximum height of 3 inches. Her boat trailer, which sat beside her garage, was considered an eyesore and needed to be stored out of sight. Her mailbox wasn't the approved style. The private property signs around her lake were unauthorized postings. And finally, her failure to attend HOA meetings was described as unneighborly conduct. Jennifer read the whole thing twice, then laughed out loud. It was so ridiculous, it was almost funny. Almost. The problem was these people were serious. They actually thought they could tell her what to do with her property. She wrote back, keeping it short and simple. "I am not a member of Pinewood Estates HOA. My property predates your development. Your rules do not apply to me. Please remove me from your mailing list." The letters kept coming anyway. Every few days a new one would show up. More violations, more complaints, more demands. Her garden shed was the wrong color. Her outdoor furniture didn't match community standards. She was watering her lawn at the wrong time of day. It was endless. Jennifer started throwing them in the recycling without reading them. But the letters were just the beginning. People from the neighborhood started showing up at her door. Not to apologize or have a friendly chat. They came to lecture her about being a team player, about community values, about thinking of the children who just wanted to enjoy the lake. Some tried guilt trips. Others were more aggressive, telling her she was being selfish and difficult. One evening, a woman named Patricia knocked on her door, holding a casserole dish. Jennifer thought maybe this was finally a peace offering, someone trying to be neighborly in a genuine way. She was wrong. "I made this for you," Patricia said with a tight smile. "I thought we could talk about the lake situation while we share a meal." Jennifer invited her in, still hoping this might be a reasonable conversation. They sat at the kitchen table, and Patricia served them both portions of her chicken casserole. For the first 5 minutes, everything seemed normal. Patricia asked about Jennifer's work, complimented the house, made small talk. Then she got to the real reason for her visit. "You know, Jennifer, I paid a lot of money for my house. My husband and I specifically chose Pinewood Estates because of the lake. Our kids were so excited about living near water." "I understand that," Jennifer said carefully. "But the developer shouldn't have promised lake access. They didn't own the lake." "Well, what's done is done," Patricia continued. "The fact is, dozens of families moved here expecting lake access. You're one person with a whole lake. Don't you think it's a bit much to keep it all to yourself?" Jennifer felt her patience wearing thin. "It's my property. That's not being selfish. That's just owning something." Patricia's friendly mask slipped. "We're willing to make this worth your while. The HOA has discussed compensating you for shared access rights. I already told Robert I'm not interested. Maybe you should reconsider. Things could get difficult for you otherwise." Patricia stood up, leaving her casserole dish on the table. "Just think about it. Being a good neighbor goes both ways." After Patricia left, Jennifer dumped the casserole in the trash. She'd lost her appetite. The visits continued. Different people, same message. Some tried to be friendly. Others were openly hostile. One guy actually yelled at her from his car as he drove past her house, calling her names she wouldn't repeat. Jennifer started keeping her curtains closed and stopped answering the door unless she was expecting someone. But the worst part was how people started ignoring her completely when it came to the lake. Despite all her signs, despite all her conversations, people kept using it like it was public property. She'd look out her back window and see strangers on her dock. Families would set up on her small beach area like they owned the place. When she went outside to ask them to leave, they'd argue with her or pretend they couldn't hear. Jennifer called the non-emergency police line one afternoon when she found a group having a full picnic on her property. The dispatcher said they'd send someone when an officer was available. By the time a patrol car showed up 2 hours later, everyone was gone. The officer took her information and said he'd increase patrols in the area, but Jennifer could tell he thought this was a waste of his time. She tried putting up a chain across the path that led from the development to her lake. Someone cut it the first night. She replaced it with a thicker chain and better locks. That lasted 3 days before someone cut through it with bolt cutters. Robert sent another letter, this time threatening fines for each day her various violations continued. Jennifer knew the fines weren't legally enforceable since she wasn't in the HOA, but it was stressful having these constant threats showing up in her mailbox. She started documenting everything. Every trespasser, every letter, every confrontation. She took photos and videos. She wrote down dates and times. Her gut told her this was going to get worse before it got better, and she wanted evidence of what was happening. One Saturday morning in early July, Jennifer was having coffee on her back porch when she noticed something that made her blood boil. Someone had spray painted over one of her private property signs. Big red letters spelling out, "Share the lake." She grabbed her phone and took pictures, then walked down to examine the vandalism up close. While she was there, a teenager from the neighborhood came jogging past with his dog. "Hey," Jennifer called out to him. "Did you see who painted this?" The kid barely glanced at her. "Nope, but whoever did it has a point. You're being pretty selfish about the lake." "It's my lake," Jennifer said, frustration rising in her voice. The teenager shrugged and kept jogging, his dog running ahead of him right across Jennifer's property. That afternoon, Jennifer drove to the hardware store and bought security cameras. She spent Sunday installing them around her property, focusing on the areas where people kept trespassing. If the police wouldn't help without evidence, she'd get evidence. The cameras caught plenty. People walking their dogs on her land, kids swimming in her lake, adults launching kayaks from her dock. One evening, the camera even caught Robert himself walking the shoreline with another HOA board member. The two of them having what looked like a serious conversation while standing on Jennifer's property. Jennifer compiled the footage and sent it to the HOA office with a formal complaint about the ongoing trespassing. She got back a form letter thanking her for her feedback and assuring her the matter would be reviewed by the appropriate committee. In other words, nothing would happen. She contacted a lawyer, finally admitting to herself that this situation needed professional help. The attorney, a sharp woman named Linda Wu, reviewed all of Jennifer's documentation. "You have an excellent case for harassment," Linda said, "and the trespassing is well documented. But here's the thing. Legal action takes time and money. Are you prepared for that?" "I just want them to leave me alone," Jennifer said. "This is my home. My grandfather's land. I shouldn't have to go to court to protect my own property." "I agree with you completely," Linda said. "Let me send them a cease and desist letter first. Sometimes that's enough to make people back off. If not, we'll discuss next steps." Linda sent the letter that week. It was professional and firm, outlining the property boundaries, citing the relevant laws, and demanding the HOA stop all harassment and trespassing immediately. Jennifer hoped that would be the end of it. A legal letter from an attorney should carry weight, right? Surely they'd realize they were in the wrong and back off. She was disappointed again. Robert responded to Linda's letter with one of his own, this time from an HOA attorney. Their lawyer claimed that the lake fell under reasonable community use provisions and that Jennifer was actually violating neighborhood harmony policies. It was complete nonsense, legally speaking, but it showed Jennifer exactly how far the HOA was willing to push this. "They're not backing down," Linda told her over the phone. "I think they're betting you'll get tired of fighting and just give in." "I'm not giving in," Jennifer said. "This is my property. Then we need to be prepared for this to escalate. Document everything. Every incident, every letter, every interaction. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case." Jennifer hung up feeling exhausted. This wasn't how she wanted to spend her summer. She should be kayaking and fishing and enjoying the property her grandfather left her. Instead, she was installing cameras, collecting evidence, and fighting with an HOA that wouldn't accept basic property rights. The next few weeks were tense. More people used the lake despite her protests. More letters arrived from the HOA. Her security cameras filled up with footage of trespassers. Jennifer felt like she was under siege in her own home. Then came the day in mid-July that changed everything. Jennifer woke up early, planning to spend a quiet Saturday morning fishing. She made coffee, grabbed her tackle box, and headed toward the back door. When she looked out the window, she stopped dead in her tracks. Her entire lakefront was packed with people, at least 20, maybe more. Kids were swimming. Adults were setting up picnic tables on her beach. Someone was installing a volleyball net in her sand. Coolers were scattered around. Music was playing from a portable speaker. They'd turned her private lake into a neighborhood party. Jennifer stood there, coffee mug in hand, staring at the scene in disbelief. This was beyond trespassing. This was a complete takeover of her property. And from the way people were settled in, acting like they belonged there, this had been planned. She set down her coffee and walked outside. Time to end this once and for all. Jennifer walked across her backyard toward the crowd of people on her beach. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her steps steady and her face calm. She'd dealt with individual trespassers before, but never anything like this. This was organized. This was deliberate. As she got closer, she could see the whole setup. Someone had brought a grill and was cooking burgers. Kids were running around in swimsuits, splashing in the shallow water. A couple of women sat in lawn chairs, chatting and laughing like they were at a resort. Beach towels covered her sand. Toys were scattered everywhere. "Excuse me," Jennifer called out, loud enough to be heard over the music and conversation. "Everyone needs to leave. This is private property." A few people glanced her way, but most ignored her completely.
One man flipping burgers on the grill didn't even look up. "Hey,"
Jennifer said louder. "I'm serious. You're all trespassing. You need to pack up and go." That got more attention. The music was still playing. but conversations started to quiet down. People were staring at her now. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed annoyed. Then Robert pushed through the crowd. He was wearing swim trunks and a t-shirt, a beer in his hand. He'd been part of this party the whole time. "Jennifer," he said with a fake smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Why don't you relax? Everyone's just trying to enjoy a nice summer day." "On my property," Jennifer shot back. "This is my lake, my beach. You have no right to be here." "We've been over this," Robert said, his voice taking on that condescending tone she'd come to hate. "The lake is a community resource. You can't just hoard it for yourself." "I'm not hoarding anything. I own it, legally, and you know it." A few people in the crowd started talking to each other, looking uncertain. But Robert wasn't backing down. "Look," he said, gesturing to all the families around them. "These are good people. Families with kids. They're not hurting anything. Stop being difficult and just let people enjoy the water." Jennifer felt her anger rising. She'd been patient. She'd explained the situation over and over. She'd provided documentation. She'd tried being reasonable, and they kept pushing, kept taking, kept acting like her property rights meant nothing. "I'm calling the police," she said, pulling out her phone. "Go ahead," Robert said with a shrug. "They'll tell you the same thing we have. Community spaces are for the community." Jennifer dialed 911, her hand shaking slightly with anger and adrenaline. When the dispatcher answered, she explained the situation as calmly as she could. "I have approximately 20 people trespassing on my private property. They're refusing to leave. I need officers to respond." The dispatcher took her information and said units were on the way. Jennifer ended the call and looked at Robert. "The police are coming. I strongly suggest you tell everyone to leave now before this gets worse." Robert actually laughed. Then he pulled out his own phone and made a call. Jennifer watched as he walked a few steps away, speaking urgently to whoever was on the other end. When he came back, he had that smug expression again. "I also called the police," he announced loudly to the crowd. "I reported a hostile property owner threatening families who are just trying to enjoy public lake access. Don't worry, everyone. Stay calm and keep enjoying your day. This will all get sorted out." The crowd seemed reassured by his confidence. People went back to their conversations and activities, though Jennifer noticed some parents pulling their kids a little closer, watching the situation carefully. Jennifer stood there, arms crossed, waiting. She felt isolated standing there, while everyone else laughed and played like nothing was wrong. Part of her wanted to scream, but she kept quiet, knowing the police would set this straight. 2 patrol cars arrived within 10 minutes. Jennifer watched as the officers got out and were immediately approached by Robert. He walked up to them with a friendly smile, shaking hands, playing the role of concerned citizen perfectly. Jennifer couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could see him gesturing to the lake, to the families, then pointing at her. He pulled out papers from his bag, showing them to the officers. Whatever he was telling them, he looked confident and prepared. One of the officers, a tall guy with graying hair, started walking toward Jennifer. His partner stayed with Robert, reviewing the papers Robert had given them. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Davis. Can you tell me what's going on here?" Jennifer took a breath. "All of these people are trespassing on my private property. This is my lake, my land. I've asked them to leave multiple times and they're refusing." Officer Davis looked around at the scene. Families, kids, a cookout. Jennifer knew how it looked. It looked like she was the one causing problems, ruining everyone's fun day. "The HOA president says this is community property," Officer Davis said. "He showed us the development plans and HOA documents that list the lake as a shared amenity." "Those documents are wrong, or he's misrepresenting them," Jennifer said firmly. "The lake is entirely on my property. I have proof. Would you like to see it?" Officer Davis studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am, I would. It's in my house. Can you come with me?" They walked back to her house together. Jennifer was grateful he was at least willing to look at her evidence. Inside, she pulled out the folder she'd been keeping with all her documents. Her property deed, the professional survey from when she'd refinanced the house 5 years ago, her property tax statements showing the lake acreage, her grandfather's original purchase documents from 1967. She spread them all out on the dining room table. Officer Davis examined each one carefully, taking his time. He pulled out his phone and took photos of several documents. Then he used his radio to call his partner over. Officer Bradley, a younger woman with sharp eyes, came inside. Davis showed her the documents, and they discussed them in low voices that Jennifer couldn't quite hear. Then Bradley pulled out a tablet and started looking something up. According to the county property records, Bradley said after a few minutes, "This matches. The lake is listed as part of this parcel. Property boundaries are clearly defined." Davis nodded slowly. "The HOA president showed us documents, but they were HOA bylaws and covenants. Internal documents. Nothing that actually proved ownership of the lake." Jennifer felt a wave of relief wash over her. Finally, someone in authority was seeing the truth. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we go talk to everyone outside," Davis said. "If what you're showing us is accurate, and it appears to be, then yes, those people are trespassing." Davis radioed for a supervisor. Within 15 minutes, a sergeant arrived. The 3 officers gathered in Jennifer's driveway, reviewing everything. The sergeant walked the property line with a GPS unit from his car, checking the boundaries against the survey documents. Everything matched perfectly. Then all 3 officers walked back to the beach area where the crowd was still gathered. Jennifer followed behind them, her stomach in knots. She wanted vindication, but she also knew this wasn't going to go well. These people had been told by the HOA that they had a right to be here. They'd believed it. Now they were about to find out they'd been lied to. The sergeant, a no-nonsense woman named Torres, turned off the portable speaker that was playing music. The sudden silence got everyone's attention. "Can I have everyone's attention, please?" Torres said in a voice that carried authority. "I need everyone to listen carefully. This is private property. The lake, this beach area, all of it belongs to the property owner behind me. You are all currently trespassing." The crowd erupted in confused voices. People started talking over each other, asking questions, looking around in disbelief. Robert pushed forward. "That's not correct, officer. The lake is clearly designated as community property in our HOA documents. I showed your officers. I've reviewed the actual property records," and Torres cut him off. "County records, survey documents, and the legal deed. The lake is privately owned. Your HOA documents don't supersede property law." Robert's face went red. "This is ridiculous. The developer specifically—" "Oh, I don't care what the developer said," Torres interrupted again. "What matters is what the legal property records show. And they show this is private property. Everyone here needs to pack up and leave. Now. You have 10 minutes or you'll be cited for trespassing." The mood shifted immediately. People started grabbing their things, looking embarrassed or angry or both. Parents called to their kids. Someone turned off the grill. Coolers were snapped shut. The organized party atmosphere turned into chaos as everyone rushed to gather their belongings. Robert wasn't giving up. "This is absurd. I'm calling our HOA attorney. This won't stand." Torres turned to him with a hard look. "Sir, you called 911 and filed a false report. You told dispatch that someone was threatening people on public property. This isn't public property. And from what I understand, the property owner has been asking people to leave for weeks. You've been harassing this woman and encouraging trespassing. I was acting on information provided by—" "I don't care," Torres said flatly. "You need to leave this property right now. And if we get called back here for any reason related to this lake, there will be consequences. Do you understand?" Robert looked like he wanted to argue more, but something in Torres's expression stopped him. He grabbed his stuff and started walking back toward the development with the rest of the crowd. Jennifer stood there watching everyone leave. Kids were crying, confused about why they had to go. Adults were shooting her angry looks like this was somehow her fault. A few people looked genuinely embarrassed, probably realizing they'd been in the wrong all along. Officer Davis walked over to Jennifer. "We're going to file an incident report. I'd suggest you document any further harassment. If they keep this up, you might want to consider a restraining order against the HOA board." "Thank you," Jennifer said, and she meant it. "I've been trying to handle this for months." "Property rights are property rights," Davis said. "No HOA can override that. Sorry you've had to deal with this." After the officers left and the last of the trespassers had cleared out, Jennifer walked down to her beach. Beer cans and trash were scattered around. They'd left her property like they'd left a public park. She started cleaning up, picking up garbage and putting it in a bag. As she worked, she felt a mix of emotions. Relief that the police had backed her up. Anger that it had come to this in the first place. And worry, because she had a feeling this wasn't over yet. News traveled fast through Pinewood Estates. By evening, Jennifer's doorbell started ringing. The first visitor was a young couple she'd seen around but never actually met. They stood on her porch looking uncomfortable, shifting their weight from foot to foot. "Hi," the woman said nervously. "We live on Maple Drive. We just wanted to say we're really sorry. We had no idea the lake was actually your private property. Robert told everyone at the HOA meetings that it was part of the community amenities." Her husband nodded. "We never would have let our kids play down there if we'd known the truth. We feel terrible." Jennifer appreciated the apology. "Thank you for saying that. I understand you were given wrong information. Is there anything we can do?" the woman asked. "To make this right?" "Just respect the property boundaries going forward," Jennifer said. "That's all I ask." They thanked her and left. Over the next 2 hours, Jennifer had 7 more visitors. Most were apologetic, genuinely embarrassed that they'd been trespassing. A few brought small gifts, flowers or baked goods like that would somehow make up for months of harassment. Jennifer accepted the apologies graciously, even though part of her was still angry about everything she'd been put through. Not everyone was sorry, though. Around 8 that evening, 3 men from the neighborhood showed up together. Jennifer recognized one of them from the beach party earlier. They didn't look friendly. "You really called the cops on families with kids?" one of them said, skipping any greeting. "That's pretty low." Jennifer kept her hand on the door, ready to close it if needed. "I called the police because people were trespassing on my property after I asked them to leave. That's what you're supposed to do. You could have just let people enjoy the lake," another man said. "Instead, you had to make a scene and get everyone humiliated by the police." "I've been asking people to stay off my property for months," Jennifer said, her patience wearing thin. "Nobody listened. What did you expect me to do?" "Be a decent neighbor," the third man snapped. "But I guess that's too much to ask." They left before Jennifer could respond, muttering insults as they walked back toward their houses. Jennifer locked her door and watched through the window as they disappeared down the street. She had a feeling those 3 wouldn't be the last hostile visitors. She was right. Over the next few days, she found garbage dumped at the end of her driveway twice. Someone egged her mailbox. She caught a teenager trying to spray paint her fence, but he ran off before she could get a good look at him. The security cameras captured most of it, which she saved for her records. But the biggest development came from within the HOA itself. Jennifer started hearing things through the grapevine. Apparently, a lot of residents were furious with Robert. Not at Jennifer, at him. They'd bought expensive houses based on promises of lake access that he'd reinforced over and over. Some people were talking about suing the developer. Others wanted to sue the HOA for misrepresentation. An emergency HOA meeting was called for the following Thursday. Jennifer wasn't a member, so she wasn't invited, but word got out about what happened. Multiple residents stood up and demanded answers. How could the HOA have told everyone they had lake access without verifying the property records? Why had Robert been so aggressive in pushing the issue instead of doing proper research? Robert apparently tried to defend himself, claiming the developer had shown him documents proving the lake was part of the common areas. But when pressed to produce those documents, he couldn't. Either they never existed or he'd misunderstood what they actually said. Either way, he'd been wrong, and he'd led the entire neighborhood down a path that ended in embarrassment and potential legal trouble. The vote was almost unanimous. Robert was removed as HOA president effective immediately. By Sunday, Jennifer heard through a neighbor that he'd resigned from the board entirely. Some people said he was planning to move out of Pinewood Estates. Altogether, though, Jennifer didn't know if that was true or just gossip. Meanwhile, Jennifer's lawyer, Linda, had been busy. She'd drafted a comprehensive cease and desist letter that went out to every member of the HOA board, not just Robert. The letter laid out everything that had happened, included references to the police reports, and made it crystal clear that any further harassment or trespassing would result in immediate legal action. "We need to make sure this stops completely," Linda told Jennifer over the phone. "The fact that Robert's gone is good, but the whole board needs to understand there are consequences if this continues." "Do you think they'll back off now?" Jennifer asked. Most of them, probably. But there are always a few who won't let things go. That's why I want you to consider a few more protective measures. Linda suggested installing a proper fence along the property line facing the development. Not just a chain or rope, but a real fence that would make the boundary absolutely clear. She also recommended additional cameras and motion sensor lights around the lake area. It's an expense, Linda acknowledged. But think of it as an investment in your peace of mind. And if anyone damages the fence or continues trespassing, you'll have clear evidence for a restraining order or civil suit. Jennifer agreed. She hired a fencing company that specialized in property line fences. They came out, verified the exact boundaries using her survey documents, and installed a nice split rail fence with private property signs posted every 50 feet. It wasn't meant to keep people out physically. Anyone could climb over it. But it made the boundary impossible to miss or claim ignorance about. The fence took a week to complete. During that time, Jennifer noticed something interesting. Several families from Pinewood Estates walked by while the fence was being installed. Some stopped to watch. A few even approached the workers to ask questions, probably wanting to verify the property line themselves. Jennifer watched from her window as the fence workers pointed to the survey stakes and explained where the legal boundary was. It seemed like people finally wanted to understand the truth, rather than just believing what they'd been told. After the fence was up, Jennifer got another visitor. This time it was a woman named Tracy, who lived on the far side of the development. Jennifer had never met her before. "I wanted to introduce myself properly," Tracy said. "I'm on the HOA board now. We elected new officers after Robert left." Jennifer was wary, but invited her in for coffee. They sat at the kitchen table, and Tracy got straight to the point. "On behalf of the new board, I want to apologize for everything that's happened. What Robert did, what the board allowed to happen, it was wrong. We should have verified the property records from the beginning instead of taking the developer's word for it." "I appreciate that," Jennifer said carefully. Tracy took a sip of her coffee. "The board wants to make things right. We've sent out a community-wide email explaining the situation and making it clear that the lake is private property. We've also updated our website and removed any references to lake access from our promotional materials." "That's good," Jennifer said, though she still wasn't sure where this was going. "We were wondering," Tracy continued, "and please feel free to say no, but would you ever consider allowing limited scheduled access to the lake? Maybe a few times? A year for special events? We'd be willing to pay a rental fee, provide insurance, and make sure everything is supervised and cleaned up afterward." Jennifer had been expecting this question eventually. She'd thought about her answer already. "I'm not ready to agree to anything like that right now," she said honestly. "Maybe in the future, if things stay peaceful and respectful, but right now I need everyone to understand and accept that this is my private property. Once that's really established, once I feel like my boundaries are being respected, then maybe we can talk about occasional very limited access for special situations." Tracy nodded. "That's completely fair. And I want you to know, if anyone from the neighborhood gives you trouble, please let the board know. The new board, I mean. We don't condone harassment and will address any issues we hear about." After Tracy left, Jennifer felt cautiously optimistic for the first time in months. Maybe finally things were starting to settle down. The fence was up. The HOA had new leadership. People seemed to be getting the message. But Jennifer wasn't naive. She knew there would still be some residents who blamed her for ruining the lake access they thought they'd paid for. She knew the vandalism might continue for a while. And she knew trust once broken took a long time to rebuild. Still, she'd stood her ground. She'd defended her property rights even when it got ugly. And with the police report on record, the cease and desist letters sent, and the fence clearly marking her boundaries, she finally felt like she had some protection. That weekend, Jennifer did something she hadn't done in months. She took her kayak out on the lake. Early Sunday morning, the water was smooth as glass, reflecting the sunrise in shades of pink and orange. Birds called from the trees around the shoreline. The only sounds were her paddle dipping into the water and the gentle lapping of waves against the kayak. For the first time since the development went up, Jennifer felt truly peaceful on her own lake. No trespassers, no arguments, no stress, just her and the water and the quiet morning. She paddled to the center of the lake and stopped, letting the kayak drift. This was why she'd fought so hard. This peace, this connection to the land her grandfather had loved, the simple joy of being on the water without anyone telling her she had to share it. Jennifer smiled, tilted her face toward the sun, and breathed deeply. Whatever happened next, she'd handled the worst of it. She'd survived the HOA battle, and she'd won. The weeks following the fence installation were quieter than Jennifer had experienced in over a year. No more angry knocks on her door. No more threatening letters from the HOA. No more crowds of people treating her lake like a public park. It felt strange at first, the absence of conflict. She'd gotten so used to being on guard that relaxing took conscious effort. But peace didn't mean everything was perfect. There were still a few holdouts in the neighborhood who clearly resented her. She'd see them sometimes driving past her house slowly, staring at her property with obvious hostility. One guy made a point of revving his engine every time he passed, like a petty form of harassment. Jennifer ignored it. After everything she'd been through, a loud muffler wasn't going to rattle her. The security cameras she'd installed proved their worth in those first few weeks. She caught someone trying to remove one of her private property signs late one night. The footage was clear enough to identify the person, a teenager from the neighborhood. Jennifer took the footage to his parents instead of the police. They were mortified and made their son apologize in person. He showed up at her door red-faced and mumbling, clearly forced to be there, but Jennifer accepted the apology anyway. Kids did stupid things when influenced by angry adults. About a month after the fence went up, Jennifer got a call from Linda, her lawyer. "I wanted to update you on something," Linda said. "The HOA's insurance company contacted me. Apparently they're conducting an investigation into what happened and they wanted to confirm details from our cease and desist letter." "Is that normal?" Jennifer asked. "It means the insurance company is worried about liability. If any residents decide to sue the HOA for misrepresenting the lake access, the insurance company will have to deal with it. They're probably documenting everything to protect themselves. So I'm not in any trouble?" "Not at all," Linda assured her. "If anything, this is good for you. It means there's a paper trail showing the HOA was in the wrong. Insurance companies don't mess around with these things. They want facts." That conversation made Jennifer feel even more secure in her position. Big insurance companies had lawyers who knew what they were doing. If they were investigating the HOA and not her, it meant she was clearly on the right side of things. As summer turned to fall, Jennifer started noticing a shift in how some neighbors treated her. The angry stares became less frequent. A few people even waved when they drove past. One morning, she found a basket of fresh vegetables on her porch with a note that just said, "Sorry for everything," from the Andersons on Pine Street. Jennifer didn't know which house was theirs, but she appreciated the gesture. The new HOA board seemed genuinely committed to making things right. Tracy stopped by again in September with an update. "We've been doing some research into what the developer actually promised people," Tracy explained. "Turns out, the official sales documents never explicitly mentioned lake access. But the sales agents apparently implied it, and Robert reinforced those implications in early HOA meetings. We're working with a lawyer to see if there's any recourse against the development company." "That's not my problem to solve," Jennifer said, though not unkindly. "I know," Tracy agreed, "and we're not asking you to get involved. I just wanted you to know we're taking responsibility for what happened and trying to address it properly." In October, Jennifer experienced something unexpected. She was working in her front yard, planting some bulbs for spring when a car pulled up. A woman got out, someone Jennifer had never seen before. "Hi, I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said. "My name is Beth. I'm house hunting in the area, and a real estate agent is showing me properties in Pinewood Estates." She mentioned there was some controversy about a lake. Jennifer stood up, brushing dirt off her knees. "What did she tell you?" "Just that there was confusion about lake access. And it turns out the lake is privately owned by someone outside the HOA. I wanted to hear the full story before I made any decisions about buying here." Jennifer respected that. She gave Beth a brief rundown of what had happened, keeping it factual and not overly emotional. Beth listened carefully, asking a few clarifying questions. "So if I buy in Pinewood Estates, there's definitely no lake access?" Beth asked. "Correct. The lake is on my private property. It always has been. Beth nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate your honesty. The agent tried to gloss over it, but I wanted to know exactly what I'd be getting into. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. After Beth left, Jennifer thought about that conversation. The fact that potential buyers were asking questions meant the word was getting out. Maybe future residents would come in with realistic expectations instead of false promises. That could only be a good thing for everyone involved. As winter approached, Jennifer made a decision. She called Tracy and asked if she'd be willing to meet for coffee. They sat in a local cafe on a cold November afternoon and Jennifer laid out her thoughts. I've been thinking about the request you made a while back, Jennifer said, about allowing occasional access to the lake. Tracy looked surprised but hopeful. Okay. I'm willing to consider it, but with very specific terms. I'm talking maybe 2 or 3 events per year, maximum. They'd have to be scheduled well in advance with my approval. The HOA would need to provide insurance coverage. Someone responsible would need to supervise the entire time, and everything gets cleaned up completely when it's over. Any damage to my property gets paid for immediately. That seems very reasonable, Tracy said carefully. And this is important, Jennifer continued. This would be a privilege, not a right. It can be revoked at any time if there are problems, and it doesn't happen at all until I see a full year of everyone respecting my property boundaries. No trespassing, no vandalism, no harassment. If we can get through a whole year peacefully, then we can talk about scheduling something. Tracy nodded. I'll present this to the board. I think they'll appreciate the gesture. It's not a gesture, Jennifer clarified. It's a conditional offer based on good behavior. I'm not doing this to be nice. I'm doing this because maybe if everyone can demonstrate respect for boundaries, there might be room for limited controlled access in the future. Understood, Tracy said, and thank you for even considering it. They shook hands and Jennifer left feeling good about the conversation. She wasn't giving in or backing down from her property rights. She was simply acknowledging that if people could respect her boundaries for a sustained period, she might be willing to share occasionally on her own terms. That felt different than being pressured or harassed into giving access. Winter passed quietly. Jennifer spent Christmas with family out of state and came home to find her property exactly as she'd left it. No signs of trespassing, no vandalism. The fence stood undisturbed, the sign still in place. It was a small thing, but it mattered. By spring, Jennifer had to admit that things had genuinely improved. She'd gone 6 months without any incidents. People waved from their yards. Nobody tried to use the lake. The new HOA leadership sent her a nice letter thanking her for her patience and acknowledging the mistakes that had been made. On the anniversary of the day, the police had cleared everyone off her beach. Jennifer took her kayak out at sunrise again. The water was mirror smooth, just like it had been a year ago. But this time she felt different. Less defensive. Less angry. The constant vigilance had faded into simple awareness. She thought about her grandfather paddling the same lake decades ago, probably never imagining that his granddaughter would one day have to defend it in such a dramatic way. He'd always told her that land was worth fighting for, that property rights mattered. She'd proven him right. Jennifer also thought about the lessons she'd learned. Stand firm when you're right, even when it's hard. Document everything. Get professional help when you need it. And don't let people bully you into giving up what's legally yours just because it's easier to surrender than to fight. She'd lost a year of peace dealing with the HOA battle, but she'd gained something too. Confidence. The knowledge that she could stand up to organized pressure and win. The certainty that she'd do it all again if she had to. As the sun climbed higher and warmed her face, Jennifer smiled. Her lake, her property, her peace. Hard-won and worth every difficult moment. She paddled back to shore, pulled her kayak onto the sand, and walked up to her house. Her coffee was getting cold on the porch table where she'd left it. She sat down, sipped it anyway, and looked out at the view that had caused so much